Welcome to another episode in A Week in Green. Today we'll be discussing renewable energy within the community. Human beings have been using nature's energy for thousands of years. Oh, bloody hell, what do you want?
Yeah, I got something to say. What about the use of the water wheels and the windmills from ancient Mesopotamia? What about the famous Roman bathhouses that used the sun's warmth? Yeah.
Okay, that was a bit weird. I'll explain later in episodes. I'll have a talking horse, but I think that's pretty much been around for quite a while in Hollywood. Our modern day society has reaped the benefits of high-spirited inventors and hard-working, dedicated scientists. But can we really do more?
Yeah! Yeah! Yeah!
You know what? He might be crazy, he might be a talking horse, but he's right. We know that renewable energy is linked to industry, like for instance hydroelectric dams and wind parks. These are pretty much quite evident. But okay, these are sort of big scale activities, and what we're talking about in this episode is actually community issues. So what really is the sort of the issue here, and are we doing enough? I mean, how much is really linked to people in their day-to-day lives as opposed to these really big things that just happen, and that's where we get our electricity from.
Did you know that more than 28,000 households installed solar panels in the financial year of 2010, with the number growing by 1,000 homes each week, spurred on by the generous feed-in tariff? Hoorah!
Well, thanks for stealing my thunder. I was going to say that. No, forget it. What can you do? Anyway, we're fortunate in this case to have someone from the Green Party to discuss some of these issues, hopefully without the interruption of Mr. Horse. I dare say he probably will do something at some point, but hopefully he will leave this poor man alone. Anyway.
Feed-in tariffs, also known as FITs, are the electricity part of what some people call clean energy cashback, a scheme that pays people for creating their own green electricity. The tariffs have been introduced by the government to help increase the level of renewable energy in the UK towards our legally binding target of 15% of total energy from renewables by 2020, up from under 2% in 2009.
There was a surge in solar power installations in 2011. The total amount of installed solar power in the UK jumped from 26 megawatts before the FIT scheme started on the 1st of April 2010 to 77.8 megawatts. But there's still only a tiny amount of the UK's total electricity generation is produced from solar panels from homes. At 77.8 megawatts, it accounts for just 0.104% of the 75 gigawatts provided by fossil fuel, nuclear, and large-scale renewable power plants. Here with us today we have Jonathan Essex from the Green Party to discuss this in more detail. Hi.
Hi Jonathan, thanks for attending the show. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Jonathan Essex. I'm a local Green Councillor here in Redhill in Surrey.
And today, obviously, we're talking about sort of renewable energy in the community. I think for me, renewable energy is really sort of something that sort of does sort of make it much more sort of tangible for people in their day-to-day lives, whether it's people having their mini sort of windmill in the back garden, or actually just having a practical solar thermal or solar photovoltaic cell on their roof. It's much more localised. We are doing our little bit. But one of the things I sort of found out about looking into community-related issues is that community can mean many things. In fact, in 2007, a paper by Lancaster University looked at renewable energy and community initiatives, and they found over 50 documents that basically refer to a community from the government in a different way. I mean, what's your definition of renewable energy in the community then, if it has so many different meanings to different people?
That's a really good question. And I take your point that it can mean different things. I mean, for example, in the planning system now, there's talk about sort of community right to this and community right to that. And my concern, living here in Redhill, is that the community might be the business community around Gatwick Airport, right to do what they like. But I would like to see a community as a group of people in one place that have a shared interest of some kind, and it's that trust and shared interests and a neighbourhood which brings everything together. So community is something which is not a business interest, it's not government, and it's not just a single household. Yeah.
Do you think that, you know, renewable energy is now sort of impression of being much more centralised and industrialised as opposed to more sort of localised? You know, I mean, have we moved from the idealism of the 70s in terms of saying, you know, it should be small scale, it should have an impact to us, we should be involved in it, or we should just leave it to the corporate giants to sort of give us this green energy on a plate? I mean, do you think we're moving in the right direction for, you know, people taking more responsibility and taking the opportunity of using renewable energy in sort of a, you know, local context?
I think we need to do both of those things. I think we need to have the big interests, the money, the incentives from government to make sure big business shifts from doing highly polluting, not long-term looking forms of energy generation to taking on renewables in a big way. And the offshore wind industry in the UK is a good example of where that's happened. Offshore wave and tidal power is an example of where it hasn't happened. Now, on the other hand, though, if you don't also do something locally, we're presented with this idea that climate change is a really urgent matter which we need to deal with, and then ask people to change a light bulb, which is quite disempowering. And if we can get together and put solar panels on a school roof, or put a wind turbine in the middle of our industrial estate here in Redhill, and have that funded through different people, then that puts our future in the heart of the community. And if we also say, well, it isn't just about green issues or social issues, if we do it in such a way where the government incentivises energy generation where the community has a stake in owning it, or gets some of the revenue generated from it, then I think we can actually say that if we come together and if we work together, we can create the kind of future we want, rather than if we leave it to someone else, we actually then just have to trust whether big business and government will do enough.
Will deliver effectively on what's needed.
They may or they may not. And at the end of the day also, if we look at energy in the UK and climate change, the biggest challenge is to cut the amount of energy we need in the first place, which is about culture change and behaviour change. And changing what maybe community is, recreating community perhaps after Thatcher declared that there was no such thing. And then we perhaps need to do energy efficiency, and then look at zero carbon technologies before going sort of the lower carbon forms of fossil fuels. So if we take that approach and say the clean energy future which we're looking for is not just about the technologies which we choose, but whether people are engaged or not, whether people actually take that challenge on and want to see if we can actually live within the amount of energy that can be supplied, then it has to be community involved. It has to be led by everyone rather than just by a few businesses and the government.
You're talking about sort of how important that you know, the money is injected into actually building, you know, sort of a more renewable energy future, you know, especially in conjunction with communities. And there was a recent article in the Guardian talking about feed-in tariffs and how in this case that the current existing feed-in tariffs for solar energy is too high, it's unsustainable. What do you think about that sort of statement in this case about sort of feed-in tariffs? And do you think it's, you know, would you agree or disagree, or do you think there's a little bit more depth to that sort of reason why they would sort of make that statement?
I think it's more complicated than simply saying it's too high.
Okay.
The idea of the feed-in tariff was to subsidise an industry while it was small, to allow it to grow, with the idea that once it grew, it would become cheaper to sell what it does, and it's been subsidised fairly highly, so it's grown quite quickly. But what we need to do is to make sure that we reduce the support to the industry in a way that allows the industry to continue to grow rather than keep it small. We've just created something around 20 or 30,000 jobs in the solar sector in the UK over the last year or two, and what we don't want is a system that drastically cuts that quickly in a way with no consultation, because not only does that risk losing those jobs and losing that growth, but it destroys any business confidence in the government that it is going to do what it says it's going to do. The industry needs to have a long-term perspective so it can invest and get the returns on that investment. On a community point of view, I think there's also an opportunity to make sure that the businesses that succeed are those which have community in their heart. So is it social enterprises? Is it locally owned businesses that will benefit from the feed-in tariff? Or is it a business that's got its bank accounts in the Cayman Islands and its investment from say the Middle East, from a sovereign wealth fund from drilling for oil? And that money would then be invested in the UK and wouldn't actually benefit the country in terms of tax revenues. So I think what we need to do is make sure that if we incentivise growth for solar, if it's British companies and it's local companies located in communities, we can actually kickstart growth, create jobs, and make sure that creates a stronger economy here, rather than just create an investment opportunity for those who are quick off the mark.
So what you're really talking about is quite a few things, not really sort of focus. I mean, one of the things about the government and focusing on solar and wind is because it has a financial, a reward effectively, in this case investing in that type of energy system, where, as you mentioned earlier on, that other renewable energy measures haven't necessarily had that sort of necessary input. I wanted to sort of jump onto the issue again related to solar, specifically related to sort of our local council. Now, I read something on the Red Hill Greens website, and one of the things that we mentioned was the local authority in relation to solar panels, and I just think it'd be quite interesting for you to talk about that kind of recent or local development, to see sort of what it really means to people. What does that really show at the moment?
Well, we set a proposal before the council which proposed that any roofs within the borough could have solar panels on. And lots of roofs are public sector, whether they be schools or council buildings, hospital. Then there's large warehouses, because we've got an industrial estate locally, or individual roofs. Now, what if the public sector and those who could afford it were to say that the money from the generation of electricity that the government gives in terms of the feed-in tariff was not taken for their private benefit, but given to the community? So what we proposed was setting up a community fund where we can invest in solar panels, which are good in terms of promoting and securing more energy generation locally in a clean way, but also use that to support jobs and support community. It's a fairly novel idea, but it has been done elsewhere. Marks and Spencer's in North London, in Muswell Hill, they've put solar panels on their roof, and they give all the feed-in tariff money to the community where they are. And all we were suggesting is the council might coordinate a scheme such that lots of businesses in the local area, and perhaps some of those who work in the City of London and can afford to contribute to such a scheme, might come together and invest in Red Hill, invest in the community of Red Hill, via solar panels. If you were to invest in the stock market, you don't get much for your money these days. But if you invest in solar panels, it can be a good investment, and if the community benefits, it could be even better.